Hey everyone, welcome back to the next installment of the Coptic class. We have with us Dr. Joseph Sidrak. We'll continue today with definitive future tense. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Sidrak to get us started with prayer. Whenever you're ready, go ahead, Joe.
هنفرعنا مذيوت نمشيري نبقى بنما ثواب نوتي نوت آمين جاب نيوت تخني في قوي معرف توب ونجاب كران مارس إين جتك متقورو كت هناك معرف شوبي إم فريتي خنت فاه نم هي جنبي فاهي هن أويك انتراستي ميف نانم فو أو كان يتيرو نان إيفل إم فريتي هون انتنكو إيفل إني أتا وننتان إرؤو أو إمبير أنت نخون بيرازموس على نهمين إيفول هابي بفهو خن بخرستوس إيسوس بنشويس جاتوك تتمت أورو نمتقوم نمتيو شاينين تنينة تيرو أمين هنفرانا مبيوت نمبشيري نمتبن متوهب ونوتي نوت أمين. Okay, well, welcome back everybody to the Coptic class, and we're just going to kind of move along here. And let me get this opened up here 1 second. So today we're going to be talking about the definitive future tense. But before we move on, let's just do a little bit of review. We're going to go back to these verbs here. We talked about some of basically what they called the 5 verbs. And, we talked about pega. And like they say here, it's only in the past tense and it means said, like pega isos or pega so-and-so or pegoff or etc. And then we had the same old pattern. Pegi, pegoff, pege, pegoff, pegos, pegon, pegotin, and pegou. And then ehne means to want, and that one's not past tense, that's just like present tense. And it's like where the word pitihnak, marif shopi, etc. For example. Ehni, ehnak, ehne, ehnaf, ehnas, ehnan, ehnatin, and ehnau. So let's look at some of these examples here. So pega isos nau. So Jesus said to them, because pega is past tense. So pega isos nau. So this is just the regular pronominal form, because nominal means noun, so it's just precedes the noun. Pega isos nau. Pega nau enje isos, using enje. Same thing. Isos de pegaf nau. This is the pre-pronominal form because it's got in front of the pronominal or the pronoun. Isos de pegaf nau. And Jesus said to them. Pegau na. So it's against a pre-pronominal form, but for the third person plural. Pitihnak maraf shopi, again with the root ehne. So that we know that it's because it's the pre-pronominal form with the kappa pronoun or kabba pronoun, which is the second person masculine singular. So I say pitihnak maraf shopi. That which you will, or that which you want, may it be done. In other words, your will be done or thy will be done. Emefriti, remember emefriti means like or as. Emefriti em, not. So like or as you like. So, or in other words, as you like or as you want. And then we talked about the imperative of these 3 verbs, iri, ini, and oli, which are the same, but you just change one letter. Ari owi, ari, erit. Any owi. This is the full form the prenominal form, and the prepronominal form. And then Eliowi, Ali, and Elite. And then we took these vocabulary words. So here are some examples here, and then we'll go through some more as we move on. So that was what we studied last week. And this time, like I said, we're going to go into some more tenses. We're starting with a definitive future tense. So the definitive future tense, you'll see quite a bit. And basically, it's saying something that's definitely going to happen in the future. So it's different than like the habitual tense, because remember the habitual tense is just kind of inherent truth, like the sun rises, the sun sets, the moon, or the stars twinkle in the night, or something. Just things that just happen, and they're inherent truths that are just they happen. Well, this is things that are going to happen for sure in the future, like definitely. And this is actually a typo here because it's not ere, it's just ere. This is should not be here. And nor should it be here. So that's a typo. So I don't know if we can ask Moros or somebody to fix that before. And again, it follows the same type of conjugation pattern that we talked about. A, ek, ere, f, s, n, eretin, ev, The negative form is the same thing, but it's the definitive thing that will never happen. Inna, innik, and there's no e here. Inne, no, there's no e. So there's a lot of typos here, and I wouldn't notice this earlier, but there's a lot of typos. Innif, innis, innin, innitin, innu. So every one of these, you could take off this extra e on the end here. And over here, you're going to take off this e. And this e. So let's look at some examples. This is from Tizbaha. Es onch. So onch is the Coptic word meaning to live. So that's the third person singular feminine. So she shall live in je, namely. Ta epsiki, my soul. So this is feminine because we're talking about she shall live, namely my soul, which happens to be a feminine word. That's why we say es onch instead of like f onch. So es onch and je ta epsiki. So she shall live, namely my soul. In other words, my soul shall live. Owo and esmo ero. She shall praise you, or in other words, it will praise you. Because again, there's no, even though this is she, there's no it in Coptic, so it's usually going to be she most of the time, and occasionally he. So you can think of it this way: it shall live, namely my soul, and it shall praise you. This one here, if ismo eron and jef noti. So this is the third person singular masculine. If ismo, he shall praise or bless eron, us. He shall bless us, namely God. So this is masculine singular because God is if noti, masculine singular. And like it says here, when it's in the second person, it can be used as kind of an imperative or almost like a prayer type thing. So you say ek tinan and tekirin. So literally it means you shall give us your peace, tekirin. But we don't translate it that way because it's understood as it's more of a kind of like almost like an imperative or an instruction type thing when it's in the second person, the second person singular. So it's like give us your peace or may you give us your peace, sort of. Ek e shopi. Shopi means to dwell or exist or to be in a certain place. So you shall be chen tenmiti, in our midst. Miti means in the middle, the middle. So this is our middle, or in other words, our midst. So you shall be in our midst, or in other words, almost like the imperative. It's like saying like a command or an asking someone, be in our midst. The next one, Ninovi etai aitu, bashois enik erpomevi, or the emperti ethik ena anomia. This is from the hymn Niknai Opanoti. Ninovi, the sins, et, which is the relative, I, past tense, singular, the sins which I, aitu. Remember, we talked about these a little bit. It's related to arit. This is the form of the verb iri when it has a prefix conjugation. And again, this is the past tense. So I'm going to click back here. When we studied these 5 more verbs, iri, when it does not have a prefix, you say ari'owi, ari, or arit. If it has some kind of prefix conjugation, then it's just alpha iota. So this will never have like af. You would never say like af arit or I arit or something like that. It wouldn't work. You say I or I ice or af item, just like it has in that other example we were just looking at. So it's I aito. The sins which I did them. So the sins which I have committed. Pa, choice, my Lord. Innik, against the negative of the future definitive. You shall not erpumidi, make their thought, or in other words, remember them. The sins which I have committed, my Lord, you shall not remember them. Or in other words, it's kind of like asking. So that's why these tenses are used in a lot of prayers, because it's kind of like asking or begging for something essentially. So it's like the sins which I have committed, my Lord, do not remember them, and it's kind of like in that sense. For there is a Greek word meaning nor. Imper, remember, is the imperative of do not. So do not. Ti ahthik. Ahthik comes from the word heat, which you may recognize. Heat means heart. And also it's understood as the heart, as the mind as well. But it's literally the heart. But I guess in ancient Egypt, they used to think that the heart is kind of where the mind or the soul was. So it kind of, even though literally it means the heart, but it also figuratively means the mind. So over here, imperti ihti. So we can conjugate it. You know, you can say something like heat, it means your heart, but sometimes when you're using it in certain sentences and it's prefixed in certain verbs, you can actually conjugate it, just like those other verbs that we talked about, like ihni, ihnak, ihne, ihnak, etc. And the ones that we're just taking. Well, it's the same thing with this. So, see ahthik, see ahthik. It's ahthik is the almost like petite. It means your heart, but it's just in a conjugated form instead of having this possessive adjective in the front. Okay. Ti ahthik means to give, and ahthik, like I said, it means your heart, but it means, you know, figuratively your mind. So give your heart or give your mind. So it means to pay attention. That's how you say pay attention or be attentive. So here, and do not give your heart or mind. Do not give your heart. In other words, do not pay attention or do not acknowledge. Na anomia, to my sins or my lawlessness. Because anomia is from the Greek word, nomeia is from nomos, meaning law, and anomia or anomos is lawlessness or lawless. So do not pay attention to my lawlessness. And here they have this transition, don't look at my lawlessness. But literally it's do not give your heart, or in other words your mind, or give your attention. Do not give your attention to my sin, my lawlessness. Here they're saying the prefix enne can be used instead of the prefix imper, but it's not necessarily true. It's just kind of a different way of saying something, but it can have a similar meaning. So in the Ten Commandments, we say ennik chotib. Chotib means to kill. Ennik means thou shalt not. You know, because it's the imperative form, kind of a command form. But it's specific to the second person singular masculine, whereas imper is kind of neutral. It doesn't say whether it's a male, female group or anything. It doesn't say it. And nik chi'owi means to steal. So like piref chi'owi would be the thief. So chi'owi means to steal. And nik chi'owi means thou shalt not steal. So the 10 commandments are all in this tense with second person singular masculine. And the last thing that we're going to take today is ente. Ente is, we talked about it a couple times. It's kind of the sort of the conjunctive tense where it kind of links and continues the thought. Is basically the best way to think of it. It continues the thought. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is it kind of duplicates the previous tense in the sentence. Like you won't really see it in the beginning of a sentence, but you'll see it in a tense, or I mean in a sentence. It's kind of has several verbs in it, and then it kind of continues. So you'll see it in the second or third position of several verbs. But what it does is it continues the same tense of the first verb. And we'll go through some examples of that. And then into ishtem is the same thing, but ishtem means not. So it's the same exact thing, but again, it's the affirmative form and the negative form. And it's very easy because you just add ishtem. Ishtem means not. So ente is when you have it preceding like a full noun. And these are the forms, again, because it's the conjugated, it's going to be preceding the pronoun. Inta, intik, inte, intif, intis, inten, intiten, انتو. And you'd have it, translated as in order that, I'll explain what they mean by that. It's not always the case, but I'll explain what that means. And these are the same thing. Inta ishtem, you would say like, Inta ishtem piromi moshi. So it will be preceded by something like, you can say, I shari and piromi, and I shari erof and ishtem piromi moshi. That means like I hit him so that the man does not walk or something, whatever. Just making up a sentence. So it's so it follows the second one or the previous one. In ta ishtem, so that means so that I do not do something. In tik ishtem, so that you do not. In te ishtem, in tif ishtem, in tis ishtem, in tin ishtem, in titin ishtem, and tu ishtem. So it's going to make a lot more sense when we see some examples. And let's look at the first example. Nahti. Nahti means to believe. So we know that from the liturgy. Tinahti amina. Or amina means nahti, nahti, nahti. Nahti means to believe. So nahti, again, it's going to be in an imperative form here because we just have the verb by itself. There's no prefix, so it's obvious that it's kind of a command. It's like just saying in English, like believe. You're just stating the verb, so when you say believe, you know that that's kind of an imperative form. So nahti, it's the linking particle, the Christos. So believe in Christ, that you, because again, intik is the second person singular masculine, intik, un. So believe in Christ that you may live. Arit, we just took this last week. Arit is the imperative of iri in the pre-pronominal form, and the pronoun here is the ti. So that's the first person singular. So arit, make me. In imibsha, remember we studied, means to be worthy. So in other words, make me worthy. In seyo is time. Niven means all. So make me worthy, time, all. So make me worthy all the time, or every time. In ta, shopi, knock. That I dwell, or in other words, be, or like stay, that I dwell with you, or for you. So make me worthy at all times that I may dwell with you, or be with you. This is missing a part here, so I'll just type it. Tina Chogi and Tataho from Tazbaha. Tina Chogi and Tataho. So remember we talked about Taho? Taho, like Tahoe, Tahok, Tahok, Tahos, Tahon, Tahetino, and Taho. That means to basically to catch up to something, or to reach something, or to attain something. So T, na, remember what? That's the first person singular of the future tense. So I will chogi. Chogi means to run. So I will run that I may reach or attain or attain. So I will run that I may reach something. It doesn't say what the something is. It just says that I will reach or attain. So Tina chogi and tataho. I run in order to attain. In per ernovi, remember we talked about these compound verbs where they're prefixed with, the noun gets prefixed with which is a form of iri, and then it turns that noun novi into a verb. So now it's not just the noun novi, but it's the verb to sin. So do not sin. Intik ishtim mu. In order that you not die. So that you do not die. And per irnovi intik ishtim mu. Inten ishtim wahisi. Ejen owai imutan. In order that, like wah khisi, wah means to add, khisi means to trouble or burden. So this means that we do not add burden, or add trouble, ejen, upon, away, one, emmoten, of you, plural. Because remember, emmoten is the direct object. I'm trying to remember. You get confused with all these grammatical terms. The direct object, third person, and second person plural. So in other words, that we don't add trouble upon one of you. So like it says here from Second Thessalonians, in order that we not be a burden on any one of you. Okay. Now the Greek word hina, like they say here, in order to, is often seen preceding the above. And here they're saying it's not translated, the meaning is unchanged, etc. But that's kind of very oversimplification of it. And that's why I was saying up here, this conjunctive doesn't always just mean in order that. Oftentimes it can mean that, but if it means that, a lot of times actually it has to have hina in front of it. Just like, you'll come across it a lot, so we'll see some examples, I'm sure. If it doesn't have hina, sometimes it can mean some other things too. And that's when it's more of like the conjunctive form. It's kind of continuing the previous tense. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we see some examples. Of hunhen etotu hina into ishtem gos in ahli. So of hunhen, past tense, third person singular masculine. So he, hunhen, is to order or command. So he commanded etotu, to them. So totu, usually hunhen is followed by etot, and you change this suffix of tot. Tot means hand. It has to do with the hands. So he commanded to their hands, in other words, he commanded them, hina, so that, into ishtim, so that they do not say it, gos is from go'emos, so that they do not say it, and ahli. Ahli means anyone or anything. So he commanded them in order that they do not say it to anybody. Okay? So that's our lessons for today. So we'll just go back and kind of keep doing what we've been doing before and just doing some of these translations. So I think we finished the last doxology, if I remember correctly last time, so we'll continue on with the next doxology. This is the third doxology number 3 for the Great Lent. So we'll start with Amoini. So I think we talked about Amu, Ami, and Amoini. The imperative of E, remember E means to come. You have Amu, means you come. Ami, like we know from him, like Amu Sharon and or so we see Amu. Ami comes from the doxology from Vespers for Saint Mary, we say Ami Evol Chempe Kipos. So come out of your garden. Ami Evol. Ami is you come, but it's feminine. And then Amoin. So let's spell that. Amoini is the plural, so you plural come. Okay? And those are the plural forms of E. E means to come. It doesn't look like it at all, but that's just the way it is. Amoin. Anav. Nav means to see or look. And remember we talked about the prefix a. It turns nav, which would have been an imperative already as it was, but it makes it even more of an imperative when you add this prefix. So amoini anav. So come, look. But you would translate it as come and look. But there's no and, but just in English to make it make sense, you say come and look. Come look, e pen sotir, to our Savior. P mairomi. Remember we talked about my as a prefix, means from the verb may or to love. So the love man, or in other words, the lover of man, or that's why we say philanthropic. You know, you may have heard the philanthropic, like a philanthropist. So that's it comes from the Greek words. Phil from the Greek word of philo. So, Philadelphia, it means to love. And anthropos means man, like anthropology, where that's, you may have taken anthropology in college or something. It means man. So love man. So it's kind of the English word which comes from the Greek, which is the equivalent of mairon, the lover of man. And agathos. Agathos is the Greek word meaning good, with the linking particle. So the good lover of mankind, or the good philanthropic one, or the good and philanthropic. So I mean, you can't really translate it exactly in English, but you have to kind of come up with something that makes sense. So the good and philanthropic, or the good lover of man. That's why you'll see it in different books, different translations written different ways, but that's basically the gist of it. So come, see our Savior, the good lover of mankind. Of iri, he did. Remember, iri means to do or make. Of iri. Hob. Hob means like a work or an act. So he did the work or act. And tinasteia. Steia is a Greek word meaning to fast. So he did the work or act of fasting. Nim Pifnishti and Taveo. And his great. Pifnishti means his great. Tevio means low. Something has to do with being low down. So that means and his great lowliness or his great humility. So come look at our Savior, the good lover of mankind. He came, he did the work of fasting and his great lowliness and his great humility. Saw Ebshoy. Remember Ebshoy, we said? Shoy means the high place. Ipshoy means the high place. Sa is a prefix. Remember we talked about Sa'owinam and Sagachi and stuff like that. So Sa means a location. So the location of the high place, so means at the high place, or in other words, above. Ni Ta'u. Ta'u means mountains. Mountain, I mean. So Ni Ta'u is the mountains. So Sa'ib Shoy, at the top, at the high place of the mountains. Et Chosi. Chosi, remember we talked about, is from Chisi, meaning to be high, or in certain senses, meaning to exalt or raise something. So Sa'ib Shoy and Nita'u et Chosi. So at the high place of the mountains which are high. So basically at the top of the high mountains is kind of, or at the pinnacle of the high mountains. Is kind of the best best way to think of it. So at the pinnacle or the peak of the high mountains. Khen u'orf. Orf means like neglect or, rebuke. Khen u'orf and sarkikon. Like with, rebuking, and sarkikon from the Greek word sarex. So with neglecting the fleshly things, or the things relating to the flesh. So he's talking about when he fasted, basically, in the mountains or in the wilderness. So above the high mountains, or at the peak of the high mountains, with neglecting the fleshly things. Of Talmud comes from T and N. N means to know, and T means to give. So he gave knowledge, or in other words, Talmud, we usually just translate it as to show. Of Talmud, he showed us Pima, to the place, and Moshi, of walking. He showed us the walkway or the way. Hina, N10, so we just took this today. In order that, N10, so this is, N10 is kind of continuing with this Hina. In order that, N10, Moshi, that we may walk, in order that we walk, and Pith, Riti. Riti means manner or way, so that we may walk in his way. So putting it all together, above or at the high place of the mountains which are high, in neglect of the flesh, he showed us the place of walking, or in other words, the manner is what they're trying to say. It's kind of an idiom for meaning the way or the manner. Hina, so that, conjunctive intent, so that we, intent Moshi, in Pethriti, in his manner, so that we may walk in his way, or go and do in his way. Korf means to destroy or break. So off Korf, he broke or destroyed. And it's Gom. Gom is, like Tok Titi Gom, thine is the power, Gom is power. So he broke or destroyed the power, and Te of he Gaji. Gaji is the enemy. So he broke or destroyed the power of the enemy. Nim, Nif, Kutz. I'm not quite sure what this word means here. Let me just pull up the English for 1 second. Maybe the cheat sheet here. Snares. I'm gonna have to look this up. It's not a word that I'm that familiar with, just to make sure it's correct. Okay. So it could be snares. So he destroyed the power of the enemy, and Nifkutz, assuming it's snares for now, we'll have to look it up, and his snares, and Nif, his, Ke means, can mean other or can mean also. So in this sense, it's obvious that it's going to mean also. Loiji means excuses or reasons. So he destroyed the power of the enemy and his snares and his excuses, Ke, also. It doesn't mean other excuses, but his excuses also. And Piref Pirazin. Pirazin is the Greek word meaning to tempt or to test. Pirazin, remember you prefix to a noun, and all of a sudden it's a verb, so to tempt. But we have this other prefix, ref, that means the doer of temptation. In other words, the tempter, or the doer of temptation. So, and the doer of temptation, or the tempter, I guess, and the tempter, of sheepy. Sheepy means shame or embarrassment. Sheepy means to take embarrassment, or in other words, to be embarrassed. So he was embarrassed, referring to the tempter. Impith, before him. Remember, we talked about impa emtho, impik emtho, impi emtho, impith, impis, impin, impitin, empu emtho. Remember? So that means before him, or yeah, before him. So, and the tempter was embarrassed before him. And again, it's all because of they're going back to talking about the way that Jesus fasted on the mountain. Ni etanuf and mathitis. So we talked about nuf, remember? I think 2 weeks ago. It's the possessive pronoun, not possessive adjective, but possessive pronoun. Ni ete, those which, the relative, remember the further demonstrative, something's further away, so you say those, instead of the nearer demonstrative, which would be this. So we're going to say those, ete, which, the relative, nuf, this is the plural, right? Because it's not fuf or thuf. It's not fuf or thuf, it's nuf. So those which they are his or belong to him. So those which they are his, imatitis, disciples. So in other words, his disciples, you can summarize it, but in Coptic they have this sort of different poetic ways to say stuff in Coptic, but we would just translate it in English as, we wouldn't say those who are his disciples. You would just say his disciples. Owo, and apostolos, apostles, eth oed, which are holy. Remember, eth oed, eth is a relative, and oed means pure or holy. So those who are his disciples, it's kind of those who are his comma disciples, and holy apostles. Methre. Methre means to witness or testify. And we haven't taken this tense, ev, yet, but it's I believe it's the third present, but we'll talk about it later. It's just basically saying that something is happening at this moment. So in other words, you would, whenever you see this tense, we're going to basically add ing to the verb. So witnessing, so we're going to say they witnessing. Witnessing to pith, itchiro. Itchiro means victory. So those who are his, comma, disciples and holy apostles, they witnessing to his victory. Again means, in a downwards direction. So in other words, we're going to say is basically coming down on top of something. So victory over. Ni loigi or loigi, the excuses or reasons. Inte of digaji. So we'll do a couple more verses here. Unishti and heyo. So remember from the very first or second lesson, we have the indefinite article. So nishti means great, a great. And heyo means benefit. So unishti and heyo, that's just the linking particle here, the n, the name. So a great benefit. Nasho, so nashe gets translated into nashoy, nashok, nasho, nashos, nashon, nashotin, and nasho, etc. But it means to be of high numbers. means a lot like numerous. So a great benefit, which is numerous, or in other words, plenteous. If shop, remember shop means to be or to exist or to dwell. And this is the simple present tense. If shop. So in other words, what's the F? The F is referring to this because this is masculine. And that's why this is a masculine, so that's why this is masculine also. So a great, plenteous benefit, if shop exists, you can think of it, exists, evolchem, from in, tinestaya, from fasting. If na, futi. Futi is easy because like futa in Arabic, use it, it's like a towel, use it to wipe. So if na futi, he will wipe, and this he again is this great benefit because it's masculine. So he will wipe, and minobi will wipe the sins. If, again, simple present tense. Skepazine. Skepazine means to cover. Like when one says of skepazine iguana, etc. Skepazine means the Greek word meaning meaning cover. So we've got the Coptic prefix to make a cover, or in other words, he covers. And me, it, chachem. Chachem is like something that's defiled or blemished or like disgusting. So he covers those which are defiled. So let's take it all together now. A great benefit that is plenteous. He exists from fasting, or basically comes from fasting. He will wipe the sins, and he covers those who are defiled. Ko en timet amalis. This should be a nay instead of a nay, so it's a typo. Ko en timet amalis. So amalis is like lazy. Mit amalis is a state of laziness. So ko and ti mit amalis. So put or place the laziness. In other words, leave the laziness, or don't be lazy, basically. Owo, chi, and take, and ti mit yis. Yis means to hurry up or be quick. So mit yis is the quickness. So put or leave, or in other words, get rid of but literally means cause, to put or place. So get rid of the laziness and take the quickness. Koti insa. Koti means to turn, but when you usually put koti insa, to turn after, in other words, to turn after means to seek or find. So seek. Ti met, remember we took the prefix met, meaning state or condition of the following thing, which is my son. Remember we talked about my Romi, lover of man, so my son is lover of brother. So koti insa, so seek after the state of or condition of loving brother, or in other words, what's a good word for it? Let me see what word they have for it. I can't think of the word. Let's see what they have for it. Well, they just have it as love of brothers also. That's fine. Owo, shoji, and sa. Shoji means to run, and sa means after. Shoji and sa. Ti agapi. Agapi means love. So seek after the love of brother, and run after the love. I think it's probably good for today. We took a lot of new information today. So, that's good for today's lesson here. And I guess we'll stop there. So, I don't remember, sure if there's any questions or anything. Otherwise, we can kind of conclude with our prayer just a couple of minutes earlier today. Okay. So let's pray together. هنرفعنا مذيوت ونبشيري نفتنا بمثواب ونوتي نوت أمين. جاب نيوت تخلني في قوي معرف توفو نجاب كران معرف إنجتك متقورو هيت هناك معرف شوبي أما فريتي خانت فاه نمهي جنبي قاهي كان أوي كنت راستي ميثنا نمفو أو كان يتيرون نان إيفل أما فريتي هون نمتنكو إيفل أني يتاون نمتان إرو أوون بيرنتنا فون بيرازموس الله نحن إيفل هابي هو هم بخريستوس يسوس بنشويس جاثوك تات متقورو منتيجون نبيو شانن تنينة تيرو أمين خنفرانا مفيوت من بشيري نبتنما ثواب ونوتي نوت. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.